At Thanksgiving dinner, my cousin leaned toward me, slipped a folded note into my hand, and whispered, "Don't eat the pie." I almost laughed, thinking she was joking, but when I looked down at my plate, my smile disappeared. There was something on that pie that didn't look right. My stomach turned, and without saying a word, I pushed the plate away and stood up. Thanksgiving at my parents' house was always one of my favorite days of the year. My mom loved hosting. She decorated the dining room with candles and autumn leaves, the air filled with the smell of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and fresh bread. The table was long enough to fit everyone: grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and no matter how noisy it got, it always felt warm and welcoming. That afternoon, I arrived with a pan of green bean casserole and was greeted by my mom, who was already rushing around the kitchen making sure every dish was perfect. My dad was carving the turkey while telling stories to my uncle. The house felt alive with laughter, clinking glasses, and the sounds of people catching up. I took my seat next to my cousin Lily. She and I had always been close, closer than sisters, really. We grew up spending summers together, sharing secrets we never told anyone else. But today, she seemed off. She was quieter than usual, her eyes darting around the room like she was keeping track of something. When dessert was announced, everyone cheered. My mom and Aunt Denise brought in 3 pies: pumpkin, pecan, and apple, along with a big bowl of whipped cream. Plates were passed around, and the table filled with the sweet smell of cinnamon and sugar. As the pumpkin pie was set in front of me, Lily leaned in close. She slid a folded piece of paper under my napkin and whispered, "Don't eat the pie." I froze for a second, then glanced at her with a raised eyebrow. She didn't smile. She didn't laugh. She just gave me a small, tight shake of her head. I slid the folded note into my lap, hiding it from anyone who might be watching. Under the table, I unfolded it slowly, expecting it to be some silly inside joke. But the words were short and clear. "Don't eat the pie." There was no explanation, no smiley face, nothing to suggest it was a prank. I looked up at Lily. She didn't say anything, but her expression told me she was serious. Her eyes were fixed on my plate, then darting toward a few other slices on the table. That's when I glanced down at mine. The slice of pumpkin pie in front of me looked almost normal. Almost. Across the surface, there were tiny specks of something that didn't match the smooth orange filling. They were grayish, like dust or ground-up powder, scattered unevenly. At first, I thought it might just be cinnamon clumps, but the color was wrong. I scanned the table. Not every slice looked like mine. My dad's piece was clean, my brother's too. But when I glanced toward my uncle's plate, I saw the same strange specks. My Aunt Denise's pie looked untouched, but she was watching me, her head tilted slightly, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I felt my heart start to race. The happy chatter around the table faded into background noise. I could hear the sound of my own breathing, feel the heat rising in my cheeks. I looked back at Lily, and she gave me the smallest shake of her head again, urging me not to take a bite. I pushed the plate a few inches away from me, trying to act casual. "I'm going to wait a minute before dessert," I said lightly, forcing a smile. My mom laughed and said, "You're missing out. It's fresh from the oven." But I just nodded, keeping my eyes down. Inside, my mind was racing with questions. What was in the pie? Why only certain slices? And why would Lily warn me instead of just saying it out loud? I caught sight of Lily's hand under the table. She tapped her fingers twice against her knee, something she used to do when we were kids to signal, "We'll talk later." That only made my chest tighten more. The longer I sat there, the more I noticed little things that didn't feel right. Aunt Denise seemed unusually cheerful, making jokes and topping off people's whipped cream. But I realized she was only doing that for some plates, not everyone's. And every time she passed behind my chair, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise. I picked up my fork, pretending to be distracted, and slowly pushed the pie toward the center of the table. Actually, I might grab a coffee first, I said. My mom gave me a confused look but didn't push it. I took a sip of water, my throat dry. The thought of taking even one bite made my stomach turn. I couldn't tell if I was overreacting or if there was something truly dangerous sitting on that plate. The idea that food, something that was supposed to bring family together, might be used to hurt someone was almost too much to process. I glanced around again. My uncle had already eaten half of his slice, completely unaware. My instinct was to say something, but how could I stop him without making the entire table explode into accusations? I didn't have proof, only suspicion. Lily's gaze caught mine again, and this time she mouthed a single word, kitchen. She set down her fork, dabbed her mouth with her napkin, and stood up. I'm just going to grab more coffee, she announced. Without hesitation, I followed her. The moment we stepped into the kitchen, away from the hum of conversation, I could feel my pulse in my ears. Lily turned to me, her voice low but urgent. I saw Aunt Denise earlier, she said. She was in here alone, and she poured something into one of the bowls of whipped cream. I didn't know what it was until I read the label. It said, not for human consumption. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. Are you sure? She nodded. Positive. And when I checked the fridge later, that bowl was the one set aside for the pumpkin pies. Only certain slices got it. A shiver ran down my spine. Why would she do that? I don't know, Lily said, shaking her head. But I think she's targeting certain people, and you were one of them. My stomach tightened. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. We couldn't confront her in front of everyone without risking a scene, but we also couldn't let anyone else eat those slices. Lily's eyes were steady. We need to switch out the plates before anyone finishes dessert. I nodded slowly, my fear now mixed with determination. Whatever was happening, I wasn't going to sit quietly and hope for the best. Lily's words echoed in my head. Only certain slices got it. You were one of them. My hands were cold, even though the kitchen felt warm from the heat of the oven and the smell of roasted turkey lingering in the air. I gripped the edge of the counter, my mind racing through every possible next step. If we handled this wrong, the night would explode into a scene no one could forget. But if we didn't act at all, someone could end up in the hospital. I glanced back toward the dining room. From where I stood, I could see my uncle laughing at something my dad had said, his fork hovering above his half-eaten pie. Across the table, my brother was talking with our grandparents, completely unaware. Aunt Denise sat in her chair, sipping coffee, looking perfectly at ease, like she wasn't the reason my stomach was in knots. I turned back to Lily. We can't just take the plates away, I whispered. People will ask questions. She thought for a moment, then said, we can pretend we're adding more whipped cream. If we take the slices into the kitchen to fix them, we can switch them with safe ones. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was the only one we had. I nodded. Okay, let's do it. We moved quickly. Lily grabbed the can of whipped cream from the fridge, while I pulled out a few clean dessert plates. I cut new slices from the untouched pies on the counter, making sure they looked identical to the ones out there. My hands shook as I worked, but I kept telling myself that speed mattered more than perfection. We walked back into the dining room, smiling like nothing was wrong. Who wants a little more whipped cream? Lily asked brightly, holding up the can. A few hands went up, including my uncle's. Here, let me bring it to you, I said, stepping forward. We'll make them look nice and festive. One by one, we made our way around the table. Lily would lean down, compliment someone's dessert, and suggest making it prettier in the kitchen. I would pick up the plate with one hand and replace it with a fresh one in the other. We worked in sync, moving quickly enough to keep the mood light, but carefully enough not to draw suspicion. Every time I carried a plate into the kitchen, I dumped the tainted slice straight into the trash. The smell of pumpkin and spice now mixed with the sour taste of fear in my mouth. I replaced it with one of the new slices, added a swirl of whipped cream, and brought it back out like nothing happened. When we reached my uncle's plate, the one already half eaten, I felt a rush of panic. He had clearly eaten some of the topping already. I bent down, smiling, and said, "Uncle John, your whipped cream melted. Let me fix it up for you." He chuckled. "You're too picky, Rachel, but sure." I carried it into the kitchen, my stomach twisting. Half of the pie was gone. The damage was done for him, but at least we could stop anyone else from eating more. Within minutes, we had switched out all the suspicious slices. The relief was almost enough to make my knees weak, but it didn't last long. I knew we couldn't just ignore what had happened. If we left it at this, nothing would stop Aunt Denise from trying something like it again. I caught Lily's eye and tilted my head toward the hallway. We slipped out quietly, our voices low. "We need to talk to her," I said. "Now." Lily's jaw tightened. "She's not going to admit it. She doesn't have to," I replied. "I just want her to know we saw her." We waited until a few people were distracted with conversation before we approached Aunt Denise. She was standing near the hallway, refilling her coffee. I stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "Can we talk?" Her eyes flicked between us, a hint of irritation flashing in them. "About what?" "You know what?" I said, my voice steady. "The pie, the whipped cream, whatever you put in it. It's not okay." Her lips curved into a thin smile. "Oh, please, you're imagining things." "I saw you," Lily cut in. "I saw the bottle and I know what it said." For a second, her expression faltered. Then she leaned in, lowering her voice so no one else could hear. "Some people in this family needed a lesson. It wasn't going to kill anyone." My stomach turned. "You could have hurt someone. What if one of the kids had eaten it, or Grandma?" She shrugged, her tone icy. "Maybe they should think twice before crossing me." I stared at her, my hands clenching at my sides. There was nothing more to say. The person standing in front of me wasn't going to feel guilt or admit she was wrong. She was proud of what she'd done. "Stay away from me," I said quietly, "and from my plate." Then I walked away, my pulse pounding, knowing this dinner had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. When I walked back into the dining room after that conversation with Aunt Denise, my face must have given something away, because my mom's eyes locked on mine immediately. She was pouring coffee for my grandparents, but she paused mid-pour and tilted her head slightly, silently asking me if something was wrong. I didn't answer. I just sat down, trying to keep my hands from shaking. Lily slid into her seat next to me, keeping her expression neutral. From the outside, it probably looked like we were just enjoying dessert and conversation like everyone else. But under the table, her leg was bouncing, a quiet sign of how wound up she was. I could feel the tension in the air, not from the whole room, just between us and the woman sitting a few chairs away, who was acting as if nothing unusual had happened. The smell of coffee and pie filled the room, but it no longer felt comforting. Every time someone took a bite of their dessert, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. We had managed to switch most of the plates, but not all of them. My uncle had already eaten part of his slice before we got to him, and although he seemed fine now, the thought of what could happen made me restless. My mom came over and quietly asked, "What's going on?" Her voice was calm but firm, the kind of tone she used when she knew something serious was happening. I hesitated, glancing at Lily, and then said softly, "Not here. Can we talk in the kitchen?" We stood, and my dad followed us without asking questions. In the kitchen, with the door closed, I took a deep breath. There's something wrong with the pie. Not all of it, but some slices. Lily saw Aunt Denise put something into a bowl of whipped cream before dessert. The bottle was labeled, "Not for human consumption." We switched out as many plates as we could, but Uncle John had already eaten some. My mom's face went pale. "Are you serious?" Lily nodded. "Completely. And when we confronted her, she didn't deny it. She said she was teaching a lesson to someone in the family." My dad's jaw tightened. This isn't a joke. If she put something in that food, she could have really hurt someone. I looked towards the dining room door. We can't just sit here and act like nothing happened. My mom didn't hesitate. She walked straight back into the dining room, her voice calm but carrying enough authority to quiet the table. I need everyone to stop eating for a moment. The chatter died instantly. My aunt froze with her fork halfway to her mouth, her eyes narrowing slightly. "What's going on?" one of my cousins asked. My mom's gaze landed directly on Denise. "Did you put something in the whipped cream for the pumpkin pies?" For a few seconds, the room was silent, except for the hum of conversation from the kids' table in the other room. Denise set her coffee cup down slowly. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her tone defensive. Lily spoke up. "I saw you. I saw the bottle, and I saw you pour it in." A murmur ran around the table. Some people looked confused, others shocked. My uncle glanced at his half-eaten pie and pushed the plate away. Denise's smile was thin, but it didn't reach her eyes. I was just adding a little harmless surprise for certain people who needed to be reminded not to cross me. Nothing dangerous. The room erupted into questions. What does that mean? Who? Why would you do that? My mom's voice cut through the noise. "That is not acceptable. This is our home, and you don't poison food here, harmless or not." "It wasn't poison," Denise snapped. "Just something to make them uncomfortable for a few hours." "That's enough," my dad said sharply. "Get your things and leave." Denise looked like she might argue, but the weight of everyone's stares seemed to finally sink in. She stood, muttering under her breath, and walked out of the dining room. Her daughter, my cousin Lily, stayed rooted in her seat, looking at the table, rather than following her mother. The room was silent for a long moment after the front door closed. My uncle cleared his throat and said he felt fine, but was going to skip the rest of his dessert just in case. Slowly, conversation started again, but it was quieter, awkward. The warmth and joy of Thanksgiving had been replaced by an uneasy tension that no one could quite shake. I sat there, my hands resting in my lap, feeling both relieved that we had stopped her and unsettled by the fact that this had happened at all. Family gatherings were supposed to be safe. They were supposed to be about trust, tradition, and connection. But that night, I realized that sometimes the person you need to watch out for isn't a stranger. It's someone who shares your table. The house felt quieter after Aunt Denise left, but it wasn't the comfortable quiet that usually came at the end of a long family meal. It was heavy, like everyone was holding back words they didn't want to say out loud. The kids were still in the other room playing games, blissfully unaware, but at the main table, people avoided each other's eyes. The smell of turkey and pie still lingered, but it no longer felt inviting. It felt stale. Lily sat beside me, picking at the crust of her untouched pie. She hadn't eaten a single bite, and now I knew why. I leaned closer and whispered, "Thank you." She gave me a small nod, her lips pressed tightly together, like she was trying to hold back the weight of everything that had just happened. My mom started clearing plates, moving quickly, as if keeping busy could keep the awkwardness at bay. My dad quietly offered to drive Uncle John home, just in case he started to feel unwell. Uncle John insisted he was fine, but I could see the unease in his eyes. Everyone else stayed in their seats, unsure if it was better to leave early or wait until things felt normal again. But normal wasn't coming back that night. When most of the guests finally began gathering their coats and saying goodbyes, the words felt hollow. Hugs were shorter, voices lower, and there were no promises about getting together again soon. The warmth that had always been part of our Thanksgiving tradition had been replaced by caution and suspicion. After the last person left, the house was almost too quiet. My mom sank into one of the dining chairs, rubbing her temples. "I can't believe she would do something like that," she said softly. "I mean, I knew Denise could be petty, but this..." Her voice trailed off. Lily spoke up for the first time in a while. She's been holding grudges for years. I've heard her make little comments, but I never thought she'd actually act on them. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a wave of exhaustion. This wasn't just petty, This could have hurt someone. What if one of the kids had eaten that pie? Or grandma? The thought made my stomach turn. My dad came back in from the driveway and joined us at the table. I don't think she understands how serious this is. We should probably talk to the rest of the family about what happened, so it doesn't get twisted into something else. Mom nodded reluctantly. We'll tell them, but I don't think there's any fixing this. Not for a long time. That night, I lay in bed replaying everything. Lily's warning, the strange flecks on the pie, Denise's cold admission. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about one holiday gone wrong. It was about trust, about realizing that not everyone who smiles at you across the table has your best interests at heart. In the days that followed, word spread through the family. Some relatives called to check in, horrified by what had happened. Others seemed uncomfortable even talking about it, like acknowledging it would force them to take sides. Denise never reached out to me directly, though she sent Lily a short text saying she had overreacted and didn't mean any harm. That message made my blood boil. Didn't mean any harm didn't erase the fact that she had intentionally tampered with food. It didn't change the memory of her shrugging when confronted, like our safety wasn't worth her admitting she'd gone too far. By the time Christmas rolled around, my parents made it clear that Denise wasn't welcome at any gatherings for the foreseeable future. Some relatives agreed, others thought it was too harsh, but I didn't care. I knew I couldn't sit at a table with her and pretend everything was fine. My relationship with Lily grew even stronger after that night. I trusted her more than ever, knowing she'd looked out for me when I didn't even realize I was in danger. We didn't talk about it all the time, but it was always there, an unspoken understanding between us that we'd have each other's backs, no matter what. Looking back now, that Thanksgiving changed the way I saw family. I used to think being related meant you could relax, that you didn't have to keep your guard up. But I learned that sometimes family can be the people who hurt you the most. It's not about blood, it's about trust. And that night, trust was broken in a way that can't be repaired with an apology or a slice of pie.